You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 222. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. What is your process for making bold decisions? The reason I ask is that this is something I help my clients with on a fairly regular basis. Lawyers who come to me who want to make bold decisions will often find themselves in a situation where they want to move forward, but they have concerns. A typical scenario is that you are in job A and you're thinking about leaving job A to go to another job. We'll call it job B. And the reason that this is a tough decision is that you've maybe been in your current role for quite some time and you feel really attached to it. You have relationships there. You've established credibility there. There's a certain level of predictability if you stay there. You are comfortable with the compensation that you're receiving and what you could potentially receive if you stayed longer. And there is this sense of mystery, uncertainty, and doubt over whether to go, right? What would be available to you if you left your current role? So that is a classic scenario. And what it calls for is making a bold decision. If you are to leave something that you know to be really good and solid, and you're not a huge risk taker and you don't want to give up on what you've built, that can feel really scary. So that makes for a bold decision. Now, there are a number of other places where lawyers that I work with will be making a bold decision. It could be in growing your team. It could be in letting members of your team go. It could be taking on new opportunities that would require you to change as a person, to increase your capacities. And so when we talk about bold decisions, what I encourage you to consider are what bold decisions look like for you and any bold decisions that you might have on your radar right now. And I encourage you to think about how what we talk about today can be used to help you take action on those decisions. Now, in terms of why today, why are we talking about bold decisions? Well, if you tuned in last week, then you'll know that this is a companion episode. Now, the two episodes can stand alone, but last week I talked about indecision and why you must break up with it. And I gave you 3 reasons. And those 3 reasons were, number 1, that indecision really clogs up your life. It shows up as clutter, whether that's physical clutter, like a messy closet, a messy garage, a messy workspace, or mental clutter, those ruminating thoughts, those unclosed decision loops, things that take up your mental space and don't actually move you forward. I also talked about lack of clarity. The more open decisions you have in your life, the less clear you are on where you want to go. And then finally, we talked about the opportunity cost of not making a decision, of not taking action in the direction of where you ultimately want to find yourself. So today's episode is about what to do once you've decided to act on your decision. You've decided to step out of indecision and you're making a bold move. Now, if you tuned in again last week, I talked about a relatively bold decision that I have made to take my daughter to France for the week. We are going to Paris and some surrounding areas. My husband is going to be coming with us for a part of the trip, but not the whole trip. My son is staying home. I explained in last week's episode how a big source for me of indecision, the reason this is a bold move is that I wanted to take the trip. My daughter wanted to take the trip. My son does not want to take the trip. And we have not done a big vacation like this where we have not all gone together as a family. And I know some people do this. They take trips with one of their children at one point and another child at a different point, or the husband and wife, or the partners, the parents, whoever. They go on their separate trips. And we have not done a lot of that as our family. And particularly, we have not gone overseas and not brought one of our children with us. And I didn't feel comfortable doing that, nor did I feel comfortable leaving my husband alone with my son and excluding him from the trip. And so I thought, this is just one of those unwinnable situations until situations presented this summer, a bit out of the blue, that made it all possible. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that. Let's just say that I made the decision to move ahead with the trip. And if you go back to last week's episode, you'll have a bit more context. And this week's episode is really focused on what you do when you make that decision. You're making that uncomfortable move. You're moving outside of your comfort zone. What happens next? And as I was playing out the steps, I thought this would make a really good topic for the podcast, because all of you have difficult decisions that you're making, and walking through the process of that difficult decision, walking through the process of the unknown can feel less daunting if you've got a roadmap ahead of you. So I'm going to share with you 4 steps that I think are essential steps to acting on a decision, of stepping into the void, stepping into the unknown, doing the thing that feels uncomfortable. And as I go through the steps, I will share my own experience. I'll also draw on examples from clients that I've worked with in terms of decisions that they've made and how this may relate to what you may be going through. So we're going to start with number 1, which is if you have indecision, if you have something that is calling to you, there is a voice that keeps calling, keeps nudging. So what are some examples of this? Well, in my own life, I've had that nudging feeling a number of times. As a lawyer, I remember shifting out of my practice where I was at a boutique firm doing litigation in a niche practice area and feeling like I needed to move into a different environment where I had the ability to practice in a broader area of the law. I still wanted to be in litigation, but I wanted to be in commercial litigation instead of the niche practice area that I was in. So that was a nudge that I sort of knew of. It was in the back of my mind. And it was just a nudge until I finally decided to act on it. And that was a nudge that took about a year before I actually implemented some steps to follow that. Now, later on in my career, I would say the biggest nudge was my desire to become a coach. So for maybe a couple of years before I finally made the decision to leave practice, to stop being a lawyer and start being a coach for lawyers, that started as whispers. That started as an idea. That started as flirting with the idea of being a coach, following coaching, working with a coach myself, and thinking, this is something that I really love. This is something I feel passionate about, but can I make this work? Can I make this work as a career? Other nudges are this trip to France. So this is one of those things where my daughter and I, since the pandemic, have been talking about taking a trip to France. And I explained in last week's podcast episode how we listened to these meditations at night and we would imagine ourselves on the streets of Paris. I mean, this is back where people weren't leaving their backyard, let alone getting on a flight and flying across the Atlantic to another continent to be experiencing a different culture. I mean, this was just kind of crazy thinking at the time. And it was so magical. And we decided at that point that we would make this trip happen. And so it's been on our minds for the past 5 years. And the nudge to go to France has become stronger, particularly as the limits placed during the pandemic have melted away, as others are going to other parts of the world and sharing their experiences. And our desire for the trip has grown stronger. So those are nudges. Now, you might think about the nudges in your life. Some of them may be on a personal front, relationships that you're in that maybe you don't want to be in anymore, or relationships that you're not in that you do want to be in, friendships that you want to nurture, friendships that you want to move away from. It might be in your professional world. And this is where most of my clients come to me for help. And that is typically you're in a role. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. You're not totally unhappy, but you're not thrilled either. You know you want to make a switch, but you're not really sure when. And so there's this nudging sound. There's this voice inside your head. It's a whisper. Now, this is the first step, is to simply notice that it's there. And what I will offer here is that nudge, that whisper, that inner knowing, that inner wisdom, that gut sense, the intuition, whatever you want to call it, if it doesn't go away, then at some point, I think you need to address it. Now, you don't have to. You can live a life where you let this whisper kind of live with you and you ignore it, you don't respond to it, you tell it, I'll deal with you later. But you may also think about what it would look like if you actually did go ahead and explore this opportunity, this possibility, this dream that keeps nudging and calling to you. And the example that came to mind to me as I was thinking about this concept was how good children are at dealing with this whisper. If you've ever had a young toddler and you've taken them to the grocery store and maybe they're a little bit hungry and they're like, "Hey mom, I'm kind of hungry. Can you give me something to eat?" And you're like, "Well, child, we're in the middle of the grocery store. How about I pick up some snacks and we can have those snacks when we get home?" And, it takes a few minutes to continue on in the grocery store. Maybe they're sitting in the cart and you're pushing them around, or they're a bit older and they're on their own feet and they're kind of grabbing at the low-hanging fruit, the chocolate bars, the cookies, whatever is eye level for toddlers, which is usually strategically placed to have lots of bright colors and high sugar content. And so that whisper that, "Hey mom, I'm kind of hungry," can sometimes result in a full-blown temper tantrum. By the time you have done what you need to do, your child is no longer recognizable. They're not asking you. They are telling you in no uncertain terms, fists flying, tears streaming, all of it. Maybe they're even full on lying on the floor in the grocery store, kicking and screaming and wailing. And, you look like you've starved your child for the past 3 years and you're thinking, "Oh, how do we get to this?" But fair enough. That toddler is telling you exactly what they need. And as grown-ups, as mature grown-ups, we would never, right? We would never throw ourselves on the ground in the grocery store and throw a full-blown tantrum. Instead, we suck it up. We wait until there's an opportunity to eat. We suppress our own desires because of what other people will think, because of what society expects of us, because. And instead of being like that toddler who just lets it all out and kicks and screams until they get what they want, we deny ourselves what we want, and that whisper either goes away, it just dies, it atrophies and gives up, or it continues to get stronger. Sometimes that desire, that whisper, will manifest in physical symptoms. So if you find yourself teetering on the brink of burnout, it may be your body's signal that you've had enough and please listen to me. So that nudge, going back to this first point, if you are making a bold move and that nudge keeps getting louder, at some point, I encourage you to deal with that voice. Give that voice an audience and decide what you want to do about it. So that is the first step. Notice where that voice is appearing. Notice it as a whisper and follow it. Follow that thread. See where it takes you, at least mentally. You don't have to act on it right away, but at least explore it mentally. So that brings us to step 2. And that is where you're going to make a bold move that is kind of like the point of no return. If you decide that you're going to leave job A to go to job B, there needs to be a signal to you, especially if you're super comfortable in job A. So setting a deadline is a good idea, but sometimes the deadline will come and go and you still haven't taken action because there was a trial, because you were waiting for your bonus, because it was really busy, because you don't want to let people down, because you just want to finish this one last thing, etc. So deadlines sometimes work, but if you've already set yourself a deadline and a deadline after the deadline, and you find that that whisper is still there, you're still being nudged, and yet you haven't moved forward, then you may need to put more skin in the game. Your bold decision requires a bold action to back it up. In the case of our trip to France, when I hit the pay button on the Expedia website that officially marked the purchase of the tickets for my daughter and me to fly into Charles de Gaulle Airport and leave Charles de Gaulle Airport a week later, that was my signal, that was my skin in the game saying this trip is on. Now, there was a little window that popped up that said you've got 24 hours to change your mind. So we did have a cooling off period, and ultimately we did not change our flight. In fact, we added my husband. A long story, he was going to be in Europe anyways, which was how we were able to solve the problem of everyone being away all at once. Anyways, long story, details, etc. But here I was making that decision and pressing that button on my computer had that exhilarating effect of putting skin in the game. That decision was then made. As far as I was concerned, that was the moment where the trip went from an idea to a reality. Now, I haven't left yet. The departure date is still a few days away from when I'm recording this episode. So maybe it won't happen. Maybe the flight will get canceled, or I don't know, something else will happen. But as far as I'm concerned, it's on. It is on. And it required that bold move, that skin in the game, that investment of my money to signal to myself that, yes, we are really doing this. Now, if you are in a position where, let's say you want to move jobs, you need to think about what putting skin in the game looks like for you. Now, for some people, skin in the game is hiring a coach. I've done this. I've had clients do this where they invest and they pay up front and they say, okay, now I'm invested in the result. And for some people, that's going to be their skin in the game. Maybe that's for you. Maybe that's not for you. It's certainly not what you must do, but it's a way of doing it. For some people that I work with, skin in the game is quitting their job. Now, this seems like a bold move, and it's not one that I see often. I think the lawyers who do this are courageous, and I applaud them for making the decision that what they need to do, the focus they need to give their job search, requires that they have time and energy to focus on it. And I've seen excellent results from lawyers who've made that decision to simply give notice, to free themselves up, and then make a decision. So if you're scared about leaving your job because you think, well, I can only get another job if I have a job, and you may have heard an expression, it's easier to get a new job while in your current job. Maybe that's true. But I've seen people do it where they've quit and they've moved on, and it's been great for them. They've had the capacity, the bandwidth to focus on getting out. Now, if you do that, obviously you'll want to make sure that you've got the right setup for that, whether you've got savings, whether you've got additional sources of revenue. You want to know that you're okay for however long you need to be okay financially. That's what would keep most people from a decision like that. But if you're cared for, you've got your needs cared for, you have taken care of them, you've got others who are going to help you, then that can be a really bold move. That is definitely putting skin in the game, assuming what you want is another job at the end of it. You are giving your notice. You are saying no more to this thing I'm in, and yes to pursuing wholeheartedly your next opportunity. Now, something less bold than that might be dusting off your CV, polishing your resume, writing some cover letters, and submitting job applications. It might be getting started on informational interviews with lawyers and other professionals who you think might have valuable information for you. It might be signing up with a recruiter and giving them your information. For me, at one point, giving a recruiter my blessing to put forward my application package for a particular job, that was the point of no return. That led to a process, which led to an offer, which was a job I then took for many years. And so for you, you want to think about what is that point of no return? Now, maybe it's not a job that you're thinking about. Maybe it's a difficult conversation with a member of your team. Maybe it's setting a boundary with your boss. Maybe it's letting go of a client. And in that case, your point of no return, your skin in the game, might be a really difficult conversation. These are words you cannot unsay. So that might be your signal to yourself and to the world that you have been sitting on this thing. You have felt the calling, the whispers, the pull, whatever it is, toward something different. And you are creating a line in the sand. You are drawing a point of no return. You are stepping over that line, and you are letting whatever unknowns may follow come to you. So in my case, booking a trip to France isn't really a big deal to a lot of people. For myself, I used to travel regularly before having kids, and it was no big deal. I would plan trips. It was super easy. Go on the internet, decide where I wanted to go. I was a fairly confident traveler. I really didn't worry too much about accommodations. I knew my way around. I spent a couple of years living in Europe. And so I felt very comfortable with last minute and all that. As a parent going with my daughter, I'm a little bit more cautious. I'm a little bit older, and I don't think that really makes a big difference, but it's been a while. So I'm a bit rusty, but once I hit that button and now that I've gotten into the process, I'm feeling a lot more confident. But that initial, we're doing this, that can feel scary. It can feel like you're stepping into the unknown. You can feel untethered. You're neither here nor there. And so that is a feeling you can expect. And when you make your decision, when you then make your investment or put skin in the game, whatever language you use to describe that process of saying yes to yourself, of saying yes to that next bold move, that's what it's going to feel like. It can feel very scary. It'll probably also feel exciting, scary, unknown, all those things. So that is step 2. Step 1, of course, was just noticing that there's this nudge, there's this thing, it's not going away. And unless you want to have a full-blown temper tantrum on the floor in the supermarket, let's answer it. I mean, I guess the alternative is you just kind of put that poor little voice in a box, and that has its own sad consequences. But sorry, I shouldn't impart my own judgment on that, but it has its own consequences. You can ignore the voice, and you may have good reasons for doing that, but it may not result in what you want long term, or that voice just keeps getting louder until you finally do listen. You finally give yourself permission to go ahead and do the thing you want to do. That was step 1. And then step 2 is you take that bold move. So after I booked the flights, we actually went away on a short weekend trip. So that's when we decided my husband would join for a few nights. That's when we really solidified with my son that he did not want to go. I have given him lots and lots of opportunities to join us. I've told him exactly how things would unfold. He knows he's welcome. He does not want to do it. We are doing something else for him instead. So he's happy with the result. We're happy with the result. And now it's the execution. I've bought the ticket. Now what? And so this is where I would encourage you to think about your own situation. Step into the unknown territories. And the things that I recommend here are very much in the nature of planning. And what I've realized in my coaching practice is that a lot of very intelligent people struggle with planning. I know this because I work with lawyers who are brilliant, and yet the planning and the organization is a challenge for them. So I am sharing my own process here because I'm hoping that it will help some of you who are not taking that bold step because you're scared that you won't be able to plan your next steps. So here's my process, and feel free to take it. Feel free to take it and adapt it. You may talk to other people about what their process is to gain more ideas. This is by no means the only way to do it, but this is how I do it. And the way that it worked for me is to, number 1, create a container. The trip is lovely because it's a certain number of days. I think we have 7 nights on the ground in Europe, all things included. One of the nights we're going to be on an airplane. We'll see how we sleep. So that already has created parameters. So for you, if you're changing jobs, for example, you might want to know that you have a certain time frame where money is not an object. You've given yourself that security of knowing that you've got 6 months or a year, whatever it is, where you don't even need a job. You can just live off your savings. You're not going to worry about it. So you've got the safety, you've got the framework, you've got the container. And for me, then, the first thing is really to look at, okay, what is the container? And that is going to then give you some more clues. And the way that I like to plan is to start with certainty. Where are the pieces that are certain? So I knew for sure we would land in Paris on a Sunday and we would leave Paris on a Sunday. So I'd like to move around a little bit while we're there. And I know that our first night will land in Paris, our first day. And our last night, I want to be in Paris. I don't want to have to drive into the airport from some city and get stuck in traffic and be worried that I'm not going to get home in time. Now, as the shape of the trip is unfolded, so have our plans. But we basically came up with a plan of where we're going to be based on input from my daughter and what she wants to do, my husband, what he wants to do, me and what I want to do. So, we've got the location. So the next thing that I did was book accommodation. I just got that settled the other night. So now I feel secure. No matter what happens, we have a roof over our head. We're not going to be sleeping on the streets of Paris or at a bus station somewhere. We are solid. So for you, you might think about what are the big blocks that you need to have in place? What are the certainties that you can already rely on? And you want to factor those in because those are going to serve as the structure, the supports for other decisions that you're going to make. Now, the third thing that I'd encourage you to think about is what is within your control. This is particularly important for job seekers. If you are going to switch jobs, then you're going to have your time frame in mind. You're going to have some of the key dates or structures in mind. But then what are you going to do? So I think about Paris and the surrounding areas and what I want to do and what I want to see. So I'm looking at museums. I'm looking at chateaus to visit. I'm looking at day trips. I'm looking at restaurants to eat at. I'm looking at activities to sign up for. The things that we want to do while we're there that are within my control. I can plan them now. I can pay for them now. So for you, if you're moving into a new job, what are some interviews you can set up? What are some resources that are available to you? Whether it's coaching support, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's websites that you like to go to. What are the processes you plan to follow? Is there a list of firms you want to apply to? Are there a list of people or contacts you want to reconnect with? So you want to look at all of the factors that are within your control. If you're having a difficult conversation with a team member, okay, so let's set up that conversation and what aspects of that conversation are within your control. Maybe it's when you have the conversation, it's what you say during that conversation, it's how you carry yourself in that conversation. How they react is not under your control. You can influence it by the way that you set up the meeting, but you cannot control their reaction. If you decide to add a team member, let's say you want to grow your practice, you want to grow your team, you're apprehensive about the cost, about whether or not it's going to work out. So you might be thinking about what are some of the steps you might take to find the right person? What are some of the protections you might put in place so that you're both taken care of? That if you hire somebody and it doesn't look like it's a good fit, it's not working out, then what next? You want to think through some of the things that you're going to do, and then you want to plan for the things that you can control. So that's step 3, is to plan the things that you can control. For me, that's looking at what are the dates that are relevant, if that is something that would apply to the decision that you're making. What are the essentials? Where are you staying in a hotel, right? Or what do you have capacity for? How long can you be looking for a job before you start to feel a little bit nervous? What support do you have? Are there people in your life who will support you mentally, emotionally, financially, and get those people on board, get everybody lined up that you're going to be potentially relying on them? And then we also want to think about, what are the events? What are the activities? What are the meetings and the strategies that you're going to implement? So this is looking at what is in your control. So just to recap then, we have that nudge, that whisper, that decision, that thing that you decided to act on, even though you're scared, even though it's uncertain. Then we move into that skin in the game. What is that one bold move that you're taking that puts you into the game? You've stepped into the arena and you can't get out. You're there. And so from there, you're going to think strategically. What are the factors that are already established? Where do you have control? And how are you going to conduct yourself? What are you going to put into place that you control? And then that brings us to the 4th step. And that is really the grace step, the step of allowing for what will happen to happen. So I think, for example, of clients I've worked with, and I think of one in particular where she left a position and was out in the job search market. And it was really freeing because she was able to explore different opportunities and to see which ones spoke to her more strongly and to get a really clear sense of what she wanted long-term and where she was most likely to find that. And so she had multiple opportunities present. She was able to weigh them side by side and make a decision that worked really well for her. Now, she could control who she reached out to. She could control where she submitted her materials, the types of conversations that she had, what she disclosed in conversations, the questions that she asked. She could not control what others were offering to her. She could not control necessarily who came to her. I mean, that's kind of also a bit of fate and magic and grace, etc. So going to our trip to France, I'm going to put structures into place, but I'm also going to leave space. I'm also going to leave windows and opportunities and the flexibility to roll with whatever comes our way, because so much of life is what happens when you're not in a plan. It is the fortuitous, the beautiful, the mysterious, the unplannable. Those are the moments, right, that really make for the magic. And the same is true for these decisions that you're making. If that nudge has been kind of pushing you in one direction, you can use, I'm thinking that's your instincts at play. That's your intuition. That's your emotional brain. That's your heart speaking. And so, yes, you can then turn to your mind and say, well, what are the structures and what's the math I need to make it happen? But ultimately, you're a human. You're not a robot. You're not ChatGPT. So the humanness of the experience is that fluidity. It's what happens between the lines. And so for you, when you're making your decision, yes, you can control a certain amount of it. And then there is the unknown. And so allowing for the unknown, enjoying the unknown, making space for the unknown, and seeing the beauty in the magic that you will create when you allow yourself to step into this unknown territory, that is where the magic is going to happen. And so for you, in those decisions that you make, growing your practice, if it's that team member, you don't know what conversations are going to lead to, what opportunities are going to open up to you, where that road is going to take you until you start walking down that road. So that is the fourth step, is to simply step back and allow the energy of the universe, whatever you want to call it, to carry with you, to help you along, and to let you see what happens when you do finally listen to that nudge. So just to recap one last time, you're noticing that there's that voice, you're noticing you're being nudged, you decide you are going to take action, and so you take a step that is meaningful to you. You put skin in the game. Then you control what you can. You plan around the knowns. You make sure you're okay. You put your own efforts into moving forward. And then you move to that step 4, which is allowing for the grace, allowing for the unknown to find you. So a few final things I'd like to say before wrapping up today. Number 1 is to give yourself permission. I think so often, and I know this was my struggle with the trip to France, is nobody was telling me I couldn't do it. I was telling myself I couldn't do it. I was telling myself I felt too guilty. I felt too bad. I felt like it was wrong to do it. Nobody else was saying that to me. And so sometimes you need to be the one who gives yourself permission to make the decision, even if it feels uncomfortable. So if you don't feel like you can give yourself permission, let my voice be your permission. I am giving you permission to follow your heart, to follow the nudge that has been encouraging you to do something different. Now, I love the example of time, and this is a little bit of a segue, or not a segue, but a diversion perhaps. I did an episode about time at one point where I was thinking about the time police, and I don't know if you've ever felt this, like you need to get things done or else. And it's almost like you've got this voice on your shoulder that's like, if it's a sunny day and you don't go outside, you've wasted the day. Or, you're at the office, but you don't get everything done you plan to do, then you've wasted your day. But in truth, there is no time police. There's no person that's going to come up to you and say, listen, Paula, you didn't spend your time well, like shame on you. You're going to time jail, time prison, whatever that looks like. It just doesn't happen. And the same is true here with decisions. There's nobody really, unless you're doing something illegal, in which case, then yes, maybe you will have some problems with the law, which you as a lawyer know well. I don't need to tell you that. But assuming that what you're doing is within the bounds of decency, you're being reasonably responsible. And even that is questionable. What is responsible? I mean, you ultimately are calling the shots here. And so the permission you most likely need is your own permission. And so I encourage you to give yourself the permission to make the decisions that you want to make, to explore the different possibilities that are calling to you. So that is number 1 in terms of my sort of last few offerings. The second thing I'd like to offer is to trust yourself. So often we can lose confidence in our own sense of decision-making, our own sense of power. We maybe make decisions and then people question those decisions. Oh, why would you ever leave that job? Like, they love you there. You're a rock star. You were going to make partner. You were going to be the managing partner. Like, why would you ever do that? You must be crazy. You spent all those years in law school and oh my God, you don't want to be a lawyer anymore. Well, what are people going to think? What are your parents going to say? We've got all these doubts and concerns that just run through our minds, whether other people express them to us or not. And it can feel really hard when you're going against the grain and doing something different. So what I encourage you to please do is to trust yourself. Trust that voice inside of you that's telling you that you need to do something different. And once you've made your decision, try not to second guess it. I mean, if you spend time second guessing your decision, going back on your decision, it is exhausting and it's not helping you move forward in the direction that you have chosen. So that kind of goes back to the clutter that we talked about in the last episode. So please don't let indecision or second guessing yourself clutter the decision that you've just made and that you've just taken that very bold step to anchor as something that you're going to move forward on. And also along a similar vein, don't regret decisions. I think sometimes people shy away from making a decision because they're afraid they're going to live a life of regret and feel badly about it and beat themselves up over it. So let's make a deal that whatever you decide, that you're never going to beat yourself up. You're never going to waste a minute of your precious life regretting a decision. Every decision that you make is one that you make with the best information that you have in the moment. You are making a well thought out, a rational decision based on what you know. And life is fluid. Things are going to change. And it may turn out that, sure, maybe a different decision would have led to a different outcome. But every decision that you make is the right decision if you choose to make it right, which is the final point here, which is to think there is no one right decision that you must make or else. There are only decisions, and decisions can be right or wrong depending on how you choose to look at them. So I invite you to make any decision that you make the right decision to have made, right? If it turns out that you end up on a path you don't like, that's okay. You now know that you don't want to go down that path. There's another one for you. You can go back and make a fresh decision, and you've already ruled something out. That's great. You think about Edison, who spent, 10,000 plus times trying to make a light bulb and it didn't work. And he said that wasn't 10,000 failures. That was 10,000 opportunities to learn what doesn't actually work. So your decisions, if you make them and they don't lead to where you want to go, now you've ruled out one of the many possible ways that you could get there. And as a result, you are getting closer. You're either winning or you're learning. Oh, and one last thing is to ask for support. I think sometimes we believe that we need to do things on our own, that we're strong, we're capable, we can handle it, we can take it. And so we don't always ask for help. And I think help can be really, really comforting. I think it can help those decisions feel less scary. Sometimes talking about your decisions out loud helps you see how well thought out they actually are. One of the things that really surprised me when I finally did decide to book this trip to France was just how easily everything else flowed. It was something that was relatively short in the decision-making time, the time it took to make that decision. I mean, I've been thinking about it for 5 years, but once the dates and the idea set in this time, it was only, a couple of days before actually purchasing the tickets. And then from there, everything else has fallen into place relatively easily. And I have found that to be true for lawyers who I work with who say, I just don't know what else I would do. But a few questions in and they've mapped out the next 5 years of their career. And so it's amazing what you may already have stored away in your subconscious. And all you need is that release, that commitment to move forward. And all of a sudden, everything that you've studied, everything that you've been thinking about crystallizes. And you are able then to move ahead on a path with greater clarity than you even knew that you had inside of you. So that, my friend, is what I have to share with you. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode and you'd like to be persuaded about why you need to break up with indecision, then go back and have a listen. It's a great companion to this one. If you are okay with what we've talked about today and you are ready to move forward, then maybe you don't need to go back. And if you do decide to move ahead, I wish you every success. And if you would like my support, please reach out. I would love to help you to make progress, to move forward on your bold decisions and to step into that unknown, to take that leap of faith, because it's a beautiful place there. I'll be recording my next episode once I'm back from the trip, and I'll be excited to share with you how it went. And I'm sure I'll learn a whole bunch of life lessons along the way that I'll just be very excited and inspired to bring into my practice. So with that, I wish you a wonderful, beautiful week, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.